With AMD closely working with both Sony and Microsoft, which will be the third console generation it happens, and powering a vast majority of PC handhelds, can we say they are the dominating force on the gaming market? Of course, for PC enthusiasts, Nvidia still has more to offer, but once ML becomes a standard in console gaming, FSR4 and its successors will have to be more widely used on PCs too. I know that we pretty much knew it would happen, but I can't stop thinking AMD is the biggest winner here. What do you think? Cheers. What do you think, Alex?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on really what you mean by winner. I think if you're determining the future of the industry in some capacity, so that it plays best to your hand. If we're talking, I mean, I don't even like talking about winners in general, but it feels like if you're looking at to be like strategically winning something, you're deciding the future so that you just keep on benefiting. And to some degree, AMD does take up that place because they are the lowest common denominator between a lot of the gaming devices that are on the market beyond PC, right? So in that case, they are. But in terms of like, if we look at other things like margins or just market cap or how much money they make, obviously they're not next to the Nvidias and Apples out there, let alone Microsoft itself. So that's an entirely different question. But in terms of like determining the future of tech, they've been behind the curve for a while now. And I think they technically still will be, even after this proliferation of whatever the next Xbox is, I still think they'll be behind the curve in general, just because there's just years of research ahead of them to get up to the point where Nvidia is regarding things like path tracing performance on their GPUs, or just even the general use cases for ML things. You guys talked about FSR Redstone, I believe it is called. And that is essentially the AMD later take on technologies that Nvidia has been showing off for like 2 to 3 years now. So in that case, whenever that comes out, they're going to be catching up to the next aspects of whatever Nvidia is going to be pushing. The question is whether or not, I think now that AMD has things like ML, whether we see, I would say, hardware agnostic ML solutions coming about, and or the conversion of previous techniques to be hardware agnostic. Because as soon as cooperative vectors starts to exist, the real reason why DLSS needs its own DLL and why it can only run on NVIDIA chips, well, the reasons for that all start going down, actually. So I'd be curious to see if AMD maybe in the future ports FSR4 to whatever cooperative vectors API exists at some point. And then we can start using FSR4 on any GPU. And then people just start saying, hey, maybe we don't need to integrate DLSS. That's a possible future that could exist. But I don't know if I would describe them as winners at the moment or something like that.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there, because basically the whole push for machine learning, let's face facts, it has come from NVIDIA pioneering stuff, which then other people copy, just because those features turn out to be really good things. And it starts with sort of denial, then there's acceptance, and then there's copying. That seems to be the way forward. And, we were talking earlier about that 2019 announcement of Project Scarlet, and I was actually in Los Angeles at the time at an AMD RDNA 1 presentation where they were telling us why we don't need ray tracing. At the same time, Microsoft is telling us that RDNA 2 uses ray tracing, hardware accelerated ray tracing, which was slightly odd. But it sort of signifies how in the PC space, AMD has been significantly behind at each step. And I think, once machine learning is properly baked into Windows, I guess, that will be an opportunity to shift up the status quo. But at the same time, NVIDIA isn't going to be sitting still. It's going to continue to innovate, even on the stuff where we expect AMD to be dominant, for example, in handheld stuff, for example. Just the fact that they can actually get out an x86 processor that runs Windows, well, NVIDIA are looking to encroach on that as well. They're going to be producing ARM-based Windows SoCs with all of the stuff that they're doing on their graphics as well. So, I think it's going to be continued competition, continued drive to take standards forward. The question is whether AMD is going to step up from essentially copying the existing feature set to actually producing new things, or whether they're just going to leave things to the developers to do, which seems to have been the existing strategy. I don't know. In terms of market share, stuff like that, I do think there is an opportunity for AMD to kind of like make more of an impact in the pre-built sector by providing Xbox APUs or Ryzen / Radeon APUs that could actually produce much cheaper PCs that have got broadly the same performance as much more expensive parted out pre-builts, if you like.
Right.
That's potentially exciting. But who knows, really? I mean, it's going to take a lot to change the status quo in the PC space. But, the more partners AMD has, the better, I think. And certainly in AMD's darker days, those console deals were hugely advantageous. You have any thoughts on this one, Oliver?
Not too much. Just to say that AMD kind of sets the minimum feature set. So at the moment, that's kind of like the PS5 in terms of features. That's kind of like the baseline feature set that's common across most PC GPUs, across the consoles. And I think Nvidia often operates kind of on top of that, and they need to have a bit of a light touch. So it's, or fun games. Like, it's not a coincidence that Hairworks didn't see a ton of adoption, but DLSS does, because one is,
right,
offers a really immediate visual impact and is easier to integrate. So yeah, I kind of think that AMD does like define a lot of stuff here, just by the virtue of the fact they're kind of everywhere in this space, where Nvidia is operating in a smaller portion of the market. But again, maybe that changes a bit if Nvidia is widely shipping like SoCs for laptops, for handhelds. Who knows how well that will work? Who knows how well, the latest incarnation of warm Windows and ARM will work if it's paired with like a really competent GPU driver stack and things like that. Yeah. Who knows? It could be really compelling. We'll have to see. Obviously, that's not the case with Qualcomm at the moment, I would argue.
No, not at all.
With NVIDIA, it could be. Yeah.
I just, Oliver, I'm just looking at the efficiency on that Switch 2 SoC on an old process node. Mm-hmm. It's blowing Steam Deck out of the water. And you just got to wonder what's going to happen when NVIDIA enters that space. But you're right. The question is the extent to which ARM can actually run well on Windows, and then how well running x86 code on ARM, is a good thing for gaming, or whether that GPU is going to be left starved of, commands. We'll just have to wait and see, really.